Our ancestors had no books, no music, no feeds to scroll. What were they doing those long, quiet hours? Studies show their brains were running a mode most of us have completely forgotten how to enter. Did ancient humans actually get bored? Picture your great-great-grandparent, times about 2000, staring into a fire. Nothing's happening. No phone, no book, no background podcast. The question almost answers itself, doesn't it? Of course, she was bored. She had to be. But here's the thing, the answer is much weirder than that. Turns out, boredom may be younger than agriculture. Let's slow down and define what we're actually talking about. Boredom isn't just having nothing to do. Scientists separate two things that look identical from the outside. There's idleness, which is simply the absence of activity. And there's boredom, which is something else entirely. Boredom is understimulation plus self-awareness. You have to actually notice that you're understimulated. Step outside the moment. You have to judge this moment as empty. That judgment is the trick. That's what makes boredom heavy. And that distinction matters more than it sounds. Boredom requires a specific cognitive move. Stepping back, evaluating, comparing. Comparing this moment to some better imagined one. So it's not automatic, not built into being human. It's not wired in like hunger or fear. It might be mental software installed under certain conditions. And if that's true, natural selection didn't design us to feel bored. We picked it up along the way. Boredom feels universal, timeless, like every human across every century must have felt it staring at a wall. But the closer scientists look, the less obvious that becomes. Our ancestors had more empty time than we do, and yet there's almost no evidence they were chronically bored. The first clue, turns out, hides in their teeth. We'll get back to the teeth. But first, the empty time. There's a stubborn myth that prehistoric life was non-stop grind. Wake up, hunt or die, fall asleep exhausted, repeat. Cavemen always one bad afternoon away from starvation. But that picture isn't what scientists found when they actually studied real hunter-gatherer societies up close. Anthropologists lived with the Hadza in Tanzania and the Jew/hoansi in the Kalahari, measuring actual work hours. Gathering food, hunting, preparing meals, maintaining tools, the number kept coming out lower than anyone expected. Around 4 to 6 hours a day. That's it. Compare that to a modern office worker on the clock for 9, and mentally engaged with work obligations for closer to 12 hours when you really count it honestly. So our ancestors had a massive surplus of unstructured time. Hours and hours of it, every single day. By every modern logic, they should have been climbing the walls of their own caves, inventing Monday complaints. And yet, nothing. No ancient graffiti saying, "I am so bored." No cave painting of a slumped, blank-thought figure. The complaints don't show up in the record until much, much later. So what filled all those empty hours? Here's where it gets interesting. Our ancestors weren't living in the safe, predictable backdrop that boredom actually requires. They lived inside an environment that was constantly, gently demanding their attention. Imagine you're walking across a savanna, not as a tourist, but as a person whose continued existence depends on noticing every small thing around. A rustle in the grass means something. A bird call means something. The wind shifting direction means something. The position of the sun, the freshness of a track, the smell of the air after rain, information. None of it is background noise. Anthropologists call the big cats and apex hunters of that era super predators. Lions, leopards, hyenas, things much bigger than you. The threat was low-grade and constant, not panic level, just present. Your attention was always partially engaged with the environment, scanning, listening, reading the landscape around you constantly. This is the part our modern brains have trouble understanding. No clean separation between work, play, ritual, rest. They all blurred together. You were gathering food and telling a story and watching for danger simultaneously. Teaching a child all at once. The brain rarely entered what neuroscientists now call the default mode. That's the inward-facing network that switches on when your environment goes quiet. The mode where you ruminate. You plan, daydream, replay arguments from last Tuesday. Our ancestors didn't avoid it, but spent less time inside. They spent far less time inside it. Their attention had somewhere to go. Here's the principle that ties together. Boredom needs a safe, predictable backdrop. Take it away, the feeling has no soil. But safety alone isn't enough. Let's go deeper. Around 70,000 years ago, something shifted inside the human head. The cognitive revolution. We started doing things no other animal does. Making art, burying our dead, ornamenting ourselves with shells and ochre, self-awareness sharpened, the inner life turned on. Cave paintings at Chauvet weren't doodles, they were evidence of imagination, an imagination that could hold a horse in its mind for hours, then translate that horse onto a wall. That requires symbolic thinking, a layered inner world, what we'd call a creative state, a built-in entertainment system. Imagine you're sitting around a fire at night. It keeps you warm, keeps predators at the edge of light, and it gathers everyone into a tight social circle. This is when stories happen. Anthropologists studied modern foraging communities. They found daytime conversation is practical. Who did what, where food is. After dark, the talk shifts. It becomes stories, myths, songs, imagined histories. Cognitive cinema, basically. Long before Netflix, our ancestors had nightly screenings. Projected in their skulls by language and firelight. Here's the twist. Ancient humans were less bored than us. They had an engaged environment by day and a rich imaginative life by night. The empty hours weren't empty, full of attention, story, ritual, craft. The mind never slipped into static. Then agriculture quietly broke something inside us. Around 12,000 years ago, humans started farming, a moment we celebrate as a giant leap forward. It gave us cities, writing, surplus food, civilization. But there's a cost we don't talk about as often. Farming introduced something new to the human experience: repetition. Predictable, controlled, mind-numbing repetition that hadn't existed before. Think about what a farmer does. Same field, same crop, same season. Same emotions day after day. The work doesn't ask for attention the way tracking an animal does. It asks for endurance, for grinding. The environment goes quiet because you've tamed it. Information from the landscape shrinks to a handful of variables. Will it rain? Will the locusts come? Will the seed take? That's basically the entire mental landscape now. Here's where the historical record gets interesting. Some of the very first written texts we have contain something startling. From ancient Sumer 4,000 years ago, they recorded complaints. Specifically, complaints about tedium, about work being repetitive. Sumerian schoolboys grumbled about lessons. Scribes complained about copying. The vocabulary for boredom doesn't appear from nowhere. Its ancestors are already there, scratched into clay tablets, the moment humans sit still for hours doing repetitive work. Scientists found something else in those early agricultural populations: skeletal stress markers. Dental wear from softer, uniform diets. Smaller bodies on average than the hunter-gatherers before them. Repetitive strain injuries in the same joints across generations. The body itself recorded the shift to monotony. Farming bought food security but compressed life's variety into narrow tasks. And then cities multiplied the problem by 1,000, locking humans into ever tighter loops of identical days. Cities did something even stranger to time. Before clocks, time was felt. The sun, the shadow length, your hunger. Time was the change in season, a context, not a measurement you could chop up and count. Then the Industrial Revolution arrived, and with it came the factory clock that changed everything about human time. Time got chopped into uniform, empty units. Hours, minutes, seconds. Identical, interchangeable boxes you had to fill. And once you have empty units, you suddenly face a question. What am I filling this unit with? Is it valuable? Is it productive? Am I wasting it? That question is the doorway to boredom. The unit is empty, you're aware that it's empty, and you start to feel the emptiness as a thing. Leisure as a separate category was practically invented in this period of factories and rigid working hours. Before factories, you didn't have a sharp line between work and rest. They blended into daily life. After factories, you did. Rest became this designated zone, often awkwardly empty, that you had to consciously fill. By the 18th century, boredom had become so common in Europe that doctors began treating it as illness. They called it ennui, melancholy, spleen, depending on the country. Wealthy people complained of being terminally afflicted. The condition spread alongside leisure itself. The more free time people had, the more boredom they reported. The opposite of what you'd expect if boredom were just about having nothing useful or fun to do. Then the 20th century stepped on the accelerator. Radio, television, computers, smartphones, each promised to solve boredom with stimulation. And each one made it worse. Because every device trained our attention to expect a particular flavor of input. Bright, fast, novel, designed to hijack the reward system. The brain adapted and slow input started to feel unbearable. A 2-minute pause in a conversation now feels like a personal crisis. A meal without a screen feels naked. The threshold for stimulation kept climbing, and the gap between stimulation and ordinary reality kept widening every year. Modern attention is now trained to demand novelty constantly, which leads us to the strangest finding of all. Researchers who study boredom today, John Eastwood, Erin Westgate, describe it not as a defect but as a signal. Boredom is your mind sending up a flare, saying, "Hey, something is off here, pay attention to this." Either I'm not engaged with what I'm doing, or I can't find a way to be engaged at all. The discomfort is the point. It's supposed to push you to redirect attention towards something more meaningful. And here's the punchline. Ancient humans had no need for this signal, none whatsoever in their daily life. Because their environment, their work, their stories, their relationships, all of it kept the brain naturally engaged all day. The signal never had to fire. The flare never had to go up. There was no reason for it. They lived in a continuous, low-key state of attentional flow, with occasional bright spikes of fear or joy. The conditions that produce boredom barely existed in their world. The signal stayed quiet because life kept them engaged. We built a world that constantly triggers the signal, sitting in identical hours, doing work that barely needs attention. We hand our imagination to screens, which means we use it less ourselves. We sever action from environment, and then we wonder why we feel so flat. Turns out we domesticated ourselves into restlessness, slowly and quietly. Same way we bred wolves into anxious house dogs, we bred ourselves into creatures who can't sit still anymore. 10 minutes without reaching for something feels impossible, which changes what you should do next time you feel bored. Because if boredom is a signal, the modern response is exactly wrong. When bored, we reach for the phone. We open a new tab. We scroll. We snack. We do anything to make the discomfort go away fast. And in doing so, we silence the signal without addressing what it's actually pointing at underneath the noise. The flare goes up, we cover it with our hand, and we say, "Problem solved." But it isn't. But there's another way. Treat boredom as an invitation to reconnect with what's actually around you right now. The small ancestral practices that filled all those quiet hours, walking, watching, making, talking, they're still available to us. They never disappeared. They just got shoved into the corners by louder things demanding our constant, fragmented attention. When you feel that itch of boredom, try the opposite of the modern reflex. Don't reach, don't scroll. Sit with it for 60 more seconds and see what actually happens inside your restless, overstimulated mind. Often your attention reorganizes itself. It starts noticing things again. The texture of wood on the table, the sound of the room, the strange shape of a thought you were too distracted to finish before. This is what neuroscientists call cognitive white space, the mental margin where the default mode does quiet work. Integration, meaning-making, creative recombination. The brain stitching loose threads together while you're not actively looking at anything. Imagine you're sitting by that ancient fire. The light flickers. The faces around you are familiar. There's no agenda, no notification, no screen. Just smoke and the sound of someone starting a story. That state isn't lost to history. It's not gated behind being born 10,000 years ago. It's a posture of attention. You can step into it, briefly, almost anywhere you choose. A long walk without headphones, a meal without a phone, a conversation without a clock. The reframe is this: novelty isn't somewhere outside you, waiting to be delivered to your door. Novelty is what attention discovers when you stop demanding it. The world is already full of detail. We just stopped looking. Our ancestors weren't entertained because they had better content available. They were engaged because they had better attention. And attention, unlike content, doesn't run out. You can practice it. You can rebuild it. Slowly, like a muscle you forgot you had. So did ancient humans ever get bored? The honest answer is probably yes, in fleeting moments. A bad rainy afternoon stuck in a shelter. A long wait for the hunters to return home. A child too young to know what to do. Boredom was a brief visitor, not a tenant, not the constant background hum it's become for us. Their lives kept chronic boredom from lining up. Ours are built so the conditions for it line up almost all the time. But one question hangs there. If our ancestors paid such different attention to the world, did they also dream differently at night? Did their nights produce the same kinds of dreams ours do, or something stranger we can't imagine? That's where I want to go next. If you found this interesting, if you like pulling threads, subscribe. I keep chasing these strange questions because they're the ones I genuinely want answers to myself. And the next one is already pulling at me. We'll figure